Hi.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Travel Unpacked, a podcast by Collette, where we swap stories, answer popular questions, and chat with guests from all over the travel industry and the world. And we wanted to say first, thank you to all of our listeners who have already shown us so much support for our podcast. You're the best.
Tell your friends.
And I'm your host, Josh.
And I'm Nicole.
And unfortunately, Kelsey just didn't make the cut. No, just kidding.
She'll be with us next week.
Yeah, she's at an all-day retreat, so she'll be back at the table next month. So I'm really excited today because we have Catherine Sweeney from Traveling with Sweeney and her husband Randy joining us, and they just got back from their first Collette tour.
And for any travelers or listeners who don't know what Collette is, this is us basically in a nutshell. We create tours at Collette to all 7 continents. We have about 170 plus tours that go all over the world. And we have a team of experts that live all over the world who create these experiences for our travelers. They create opportunities to dive into the local culture and see all of the iconic sites. And our tours are guided by experts. They are planned by experts. So it takes all the worry out of traveling. That's probably the best way to put it. Is for anyone who hates planning your own trip, we take all of that off of your plate, which is very convenient. It would be great for me. I'm not a great planner, so that would be the ideal way to travel.
Yeah, so travelers have to find their perfect tour, and then that's really it. We take care of everything because let's face it, planning a vacation, it's It's a lot. There's a lot to do in executing it. It's a lot of work, and I know because, for our personal travel, I do all the traveling planning, and my husband, who I love dearly, he just gets to show up. So what I love about Colette is that we do it all for you, and we do it well, and we've been doing it for over 105 years. I mean, not you and I personally, but, we've really learned a thing or 2 here.
It does feel like that though, doesn't it?
I mean, we have known each other for almost 30 years now, which
It's
is
true.
absolutely crazy.
It's true. And in my house, I'm the opposite of you. I am the one who just shows up. And I'm usually late, but I show up and usually forget half the things that I'm supposed to bring with me.
That's my husband too, he forgets everything. That's why I have to pack for him, but I love you.
And we're excited to hear, as Josh mentioned, from Catherine and Randy all about the Balkans, which is where they took their first trip to this region of the Balkans. And I have to admit that a few years ago, I didn't know all of the places that were included in this vast region.
Yeah, I had no idea either. I mean, it was surprising. So when we said we were gonna do the Balkans, I thought, "Where is that? That sounds like this exotic, far off region." And then come to find out I had actually been there because the Balkans is vast and it takes up Albania, Bosnia, Herzegovina, there's Romania, Serbia, Kosovo, Croatia, Montenegro. I'm probably missing a few. Slovenia, that's in there as well.
I went to Dubrovnik during a Mediterranean cruise many, many years ago, and it was a very quick visit. I think I was there for about 3 hours, but I do remember the beautiful architecture, the orange roofs on the buildings, and I thought it was so interesting, I'm a reader, I'm a diehard, reader, I'm a writer. So for me, the coolest piece of trivia was that Agatha Christie actually spent her 2nd honeymoon in Dubrovnik. Did you know that?
I did not know that. That's very interesting. I've only ever really associated with her with the Nile and the book Death on the Nile, which turned into a movie, which I have not read or seen.
Well, I don't know where her first honeymoon was. That actually, to any listeners who might know where Agatha Christie took her first honeymoon, let us know. But I know she took her 2nd honeymoon to Dubrovnik because they told me that when I was there, and the writer and me and the reader and me just, thought that was pretty cool. But it's a great place. I definitely have to go back. 3 hours was 100% not enough time to get the most out of it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we should have a whole episode dedicated on authors and the places that they've gotten inspiration from. That could be fun.
Oh, definitely.
But, yep, so back to our topic here, which is the Balkans. I mean, as I mentioned, I've been to Croatia, I've been to Slovenia, about 5 to 6 years ago in the big height of Game of Thrones. That was, like, the big thing to do when you're in Dubrovnik, so I'm so excited to talk to our guests in a few moments all about their stories and their tour and to hear all that they have to say.
And I'm curious too, because it's a trending region. We know that. And right now travelers are adding this to their bucket list. This idea of going to the Balkans and exploring all of the places in the region. And I'm thinking of Kelsey because she's not here with us this week, but our co-host Kelsey, last time we were together, mentioned her bucket list
Yeah, she has a physical bucket
on
list.
her phone.
So let's call it a digital bucket list.
And she mentioned a few things that she got married in Hawaii. That was one of them.
I think she said that she had taken a hot air balloon over Spain, over Montserrat.
And she ziplined in Colorado over the Royal Gorge.
That sounds amazingly terrifying, but, we know that her list is long, and what we don't know, though, is what's on the list, everything on the list, so I think we should each guess something that's on her bucket list and see if we're right, and listeners, send us your ideas. What's on Kelsey's bucket list? She can tell us if we're right or wrong.
There's well, I mean, there's no wrong. If you're talking about a bucket list and people have really good ideas, Kelsey won't say, I imagine that anyone's wrong. She'll just start adding to this list because she's like loving her list. So she'll probably add to it until it's, completely impossible to achieve.
And then we're really excited to jump this conversation off with Catherine and Randy, who are joining us as they joined the Taste of the Balkans tour last year. So we're really excited to have them on. So let's welcome both of them.
Well, thank you. Hi.
Thank you.
Hi
Yeah.
there.
Hi, Catherine. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Yeah, we are really excited to be taking part in your new Travel Unpacked series. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Randy, how are you doing?
Doing great. Great. Great to be aboard here. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. I have been looking at your Instagram, your blog, and I am well, actually, and speaking of bucket list, I've added a few things to mine, but I love the
Good.
sort of James Bond theme that you mentioned when you went to Monaco. Your Earth Day post that I was more recent
Mhm.
was of Plitvice Lakes. I think that's so beautiful. That was the perfect choice. So you guys have such a great feed full of experiences that are obviously amazing.
Well, thank you. That's what we aim to do.
So I would love to know before we kind of talk about Croatia is what got you involved into wanting to create these blogs and these experiences for people to read and to follow along? What really was that passion that drove you to want to do this?
Well, it was the passion that came from a lifetime of loving to travel. Going back to when I was a kid growing up in the Chicago area, my family did a lot of road trips. We crossed country, north, south, east, and west, and covered a lot of states. Went up into Canada, and that's where it all began for me. I loved it, and in fact, it sparked an interest in you know dreaming to go beyond our continent as well. In fact, as a grade schooler, I had an extensive travel guide collection. I mean, I didn't know anyone else who did, but I sent in for travel guides from all over the world. And so when I started my blog 13 years ago, it was really kind of to share that enthusiasm and hopefully offer inspiration and insights to other people who might benefit from that and get out and go places. So that was the start of it all and why I started it.
I love that. One of your major focuses is really North America and Europe in general, right?
Yeah. Yeah, certainly. Yeah, we've got a lot of focus on, well, we're quite well traveled, Randy and I too, in North America and the Caribbean. But, Europe keeps drawing us back as well. And so we're very well traveled there. I think representative of kind of the way, how some of our ways of traveling and places we like to go is we can look at just since COVID. Um, uh, we've had several international trips to Europe where we revisited favorite places and added other countries, cities, or regions, to the mix, as well while we were doing that.
Hey, Randy, do you get to enjoy doing blogs too, or are you just kind of along for the ride and enjoy the beautiful experiences?
No, I do a little bit of writing. I think I'll be doing a lot more of that. I've got a little bit more time to devote to this. I've been working full time up until now, and so yeah, I expect to do it. I do write it. I edit a lot of what Sweeney writes. I do a lot of the picture taking. So that's really been most of the involvement that I've had.
And you take the trips, right? You take all the
Take
trips
the
together.
trips, absolutely. Yep, absolutely. So it's really fortunate to be able to be included on many travels that we have.
Well, he's an amazing travel companion. I'm very lucky in that regard. Yeah.
And sounds like a great photo taker.
I think the thing that we've shared among many, many other things that are common is our love of travel. What's different about my experience, unlike Sweeney, I didn't travel at all from the time I was in grade school or high school. It was really after that that I began a bit of traveling, but mostly since I've been with Sweeney. So I've been, and I always joke that although Sweeney, it was completely her idea to have the blog and traveling with Sweeney. I always say that, well, the website is really named after me because I'm the one who's traveling with Sweeney and been doing it for 34 years. But the other thing I would add to that is that the blog has been going for 13 years, and that really gave Sweeney and I the opportunity to share it with many other people.
And for those that are listening too, you can check out all those blogs at Traveling with Sweeney. That's SWEENEY.com. And really, it's amazing that there's just so much wonderful content on there for those that are looking for information on different tours or different aspects of travel, which kind of brings us to Croatia and or actually, really the Balkans itself. And what made you decide like this was something that you really wanted to experience? Was it the multiple countries? Was it the region that you had never been to before?
Yes. Yes and yes. Yeah, it was a region we had never been to before, and, we had been looking at Croatia for quite a while, thinking, "Oh, we'd really love to go to Croatia," people were talking about it. There was a Game of Thrones, which is Randy's thing, and, so we were very interested in it. So but what really added to it was then looking to see, okay, what are the Balkans? Because we weren't all that familiar, either at the time. And it's like, well, this is fascinating. Bosnia, Herzegovina, Slovenia, Montenegro. There were places that, particularly Bosnia, where I didn't necessarily, have that on my radar, for a while because, maybe I think many people don't. We know of Bosnia. We know some history. We remember the war. We remember things like that. But I didn't necessarily think of it as, my next, travel spot. Um, but that also brings me to, why I also thought it was ideal for it being a guided land tour that we would do this trip on. Because although we're, quite comfortable planning our own itineraries in many places, I don't know if I would know where to start to, plan something that would cover that particular region. And so, and I think that I found it to be, essential really for a first time visit that is how we did it, to have experts who knew how to navigate the ins and outs of crossing the borders, who knew the language, things like that. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, and did you feel, obviously, you had said that it was something that you hadn't always had on your radar. Did it meet your expectations or surpass them? Would you recommend this tour to your friends?
Oh, absolutely, to all of that, and I know Randy will agree to that. Um, every aspect. That's one of the big pluses or thought of work, going with Colette on this was the way the itineraries were so beautifully planned out and consisted of a wonderful blend of history and culture, food, wine, nature with the lakes, of course, and Lake Bled. So, and that's exactly the kind of thing we've always looked for in our travels is that blend of experiences. And the product, whoever did the product designing on that or the team of people at Colette, I think they did a fantastic job. And so we definitely would recommend it. Also, I can't say enough about our tour manager, who's Jukin Jukanovic. And he asked us to call him Juka, which is the familiar form of his name. And, he was knowledgeable of not only his country of Montenegro, but the entire region. Knowledgeable, passionate about it, friendly and fun. We all felt pretty much like a big family, quite quickly in the game.
Do you feel you got to know the culture on a deeper level on this tour?
Yeah, I think so. Randy, you think so too?
Yeah, I think so much, and certainly I think a lot more than we would have if we'd planned a trip on our own. And was really surprised about the diversity of culture in what had been, just really formerly one country, Yugoslavia.
Right. Yeah. And I think particularly once again getting into Bosnia and Sarajevo, I think we really that's where I think had the most immersion into the culture. And in Sarajevo itself, where East meets West, the blending of the Ottoman Empire type history with the Austro-Hungarian history of the area, and going to the remote village. We had a day trip up to Lukamir. Um, that was a very good, an excellent cultural experience.
I think I remember when I was there too, because we went through Bosnia and Herzegovina, and just driving around and still seeing the effects of the war that had happened, some of the buildings still crumbling, still seeing the shots in the building itself. Like that was just to me very
Yeah, you
impactful.
notice that as soon as you're driving into the city of Sarajevo, you start to feel that. And Randy and I always talk about, or one of the many things we talk about on the trip is the Tunnel of Hope experience too that we did with Colette. You want to say something about that, Randy?
Yeah, I think in general, one of the things about Bosnia was the people themselves were just so upbeat. And generally, I think that's true of all of the Balkan countries we were at. And, but particularly there, given the rather horrible war that was there in the 90s, the really positive attitudes people had and their reflections upon, in some respects, it was neighbor against neighbor. And as the tour guide for the Tunnel of Hope, who was just amazing. He was a former veteran who I think volunteered at the age of 15 and a half. And his comment was, um, we are all Bosnians, he said. There is no thought of revenge. We are just one. And it's so very, very positive. And he talked about what it was like, that was the lifeline to the rest of the world during Sarajevo's uh, uh, siege during the war, which was pretty amazing. So it really was a great activity that we certainly wouldn't have come by such a knowledgeable guide and just positive guide. It was really a lot of fun.
That's awesome. And did you have the opportunity, I know you mentioned the Bosnian people, to meet with the Bosnian war survivor? I know that's one of the highlights of the tour, and what did that experience mean to you?
Well, and I think that's referring to Amir, who was the actual person who guided us through the tunnel, the same tunnel he went through as a young soldier, back in those days to deliver supplies and food, all power cables, anything that got the people of Sarajevo to make it through that siege.
That's incredible. And I know with our so this is one of our small group tours, and with these tours, we aim to have a lot of local experiences, but connect to the history, connect to the destination in a very meaningful way, honoring the heritage, honoring what they've been through. And I feel like that experience, when I look, when I talk about whether or not this destination's on my bucket list, for me, it comes down to these meaningful moments that are beyond the sightseeing and beyond the iconic sites. It just the stuff that stays with you long after you've gone home.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And we had that kind of experience. I mean, even talking to each local guide in the destinations. They were all people who were born and raised in the places they were showing us, and that was all very meaningful to get that real insight to what it's like today to live there and what it might have been like back in other times. So
I think, as you mentioned, bucket list, Croatia had kind of been on my bucket list because of Game of Thrones, but not the Balkan region in general. And after COVID, when we felt we really missed travel more than anything for about 2 years, we had a fairly large number of trips, to one to France, one to Spain, one to Greece. I'm missing 3 or 4. Sweeney could add those. But when we talk to people about our travels post COVID, it's the Balkan tour that I always bring up, and that's the one I spend all my time on and hardly mention the other ones. The Collette experience itself really matched with what we did, and we use the term immersive in some respects for really getting to experience the people and the traditions and the culture and so on. And that's always a treat for our travel. And this one, I think, had much more of that compared to some of the other ones. And the emotion of things like the experience in Bosnia as well. But we experienced other aspects that were similar to that.
Yeah, I think that the diversity he mentions is important. First of all, with diversity landscapes, it's tremendous. You've got the coastal towns of Croatia, you've got the inland vineyards and olive groves, and mountainous areas, lakes. So geographically, very diverse. Culturally, quite a lot of diversity. And the experiences themselves were diverse. For instance, with if I think about my favorite experiences of the trip, now, first of all, it's hard to ever come down with, just a couple, but because there was something special every day. There was something
Your
that
favorite
stood out.
child?
Yeah, who's your favorite child? It's the same thing. Something special every day. But of course, we've already spoken quite a bit about the Bosnia experience. That whole time, that was very key in Sarajevo itself, and the day trip to Lukamir. All of that. But I also look at our first, our full day that was in Dubrovnik. Like you, Nicole, we had been in Dubrovnik for like 3 hours or something, as part of
You
a
don't get it.
cruise.
Yeah. You don't get
Uh,
enough of it.
You don't. So this was really special. And I considered that day in particular to be like one of my highlights too, because it really kind of set the tone for the whole trip. It was a great way to start things off. We were busy all day. We did doing great fun things. The walking tour in the morning was really quite nice and informative, and our guide gave us some great tips of restaurants to go to, other things to do, and so we did those. We had a great lunch out by the harbor. We walked the city walls. We took the cable car up to the top of the mountain. Also, on a free time thing we did was we hired a private boat to with one of the other guests. We did this to go around the harbor. It was like an hour tour. Um,
But
and
that was very serendipitous,
yeah,
which was nice, I think, about the tour and the free time. I think the free time allowed us to leverage a lot of the recommendations, so we really maximized our time during the free time. But also there were just serendipitous events, and for me, that one was a great one because, as it turned out, the person who was driving the boat and giving us the tour, it allowed us to see the harbor and more of the island and things of that sort. But also, he had been involved with Game of Thrones as a person involved with the transportation. And so he was able to add a lot more detail to that and some of the history. So that was a neat serendipitous event. There was the cliffside bar kind of thing that we did.
yeah, that's something that our tour guide had recommended. I think they're called bougie bars, and they're hard to find. You wouldn't really easily see them, but as you're walking the city walls, there's a part where you get to where there's an opening, a small door opening, and you go through that, and there you are, cliffside, right over the water, and you can have a cocktail there. And so, of course, we did that. And anyway, it was a great day with great camaraderie already between us and our tour manager, Juka, as well as a few of the other guests that we already got to know and hung out with a bit too throughout the tour.
So, Randy, do you feel like you got your Game of Thrones fix?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it was really good. certainly one of the highlights was watching Sweeney do the walk of shame.
Did you see that?
Like I saw that on your Instagram, your blog, and yeah,
Yeah, he insisted I do that.
Do you believe I've never watched the Game of Thrones?
Well, you missed something.
I believe it. I believe it. I have seen a couple of episodes, but I just never really got into it. So that was pretty much it.
I said the Game of Thrones. I think it's just Game of Thrones, right? Just Game of Thrones.
yeah.
Yeah.
I was a big Game of Thrones fan. That was the best part about being in Dubrovnik, was to be able to go down in the castle where the dragons were.
Yes.
It was really phenomenal.
Very cool. Yeah, it was really cool to you know, it helped to have the guides because you could recognize the places. You might not immediately on the first. The place where the dragons was a good example because uh I would never have tied that together in the scene. It was so dark and so on. Uh, but yeah, that was pretty neat. What was interesting, the guide had talked about the walk of shame, and she had mentioned the you know, the hiatus with having this throng of visitors that were coming because of Game of Thrones during the COVID episode, and they talked about the people there were all of those places along that stairway are you know, inhabited. People live in those buildings and apartments, and she said they really got tired of hearing people shouting at 2 in the morning, shame, 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 as well as a number of them apparently doing it in the nude.
Oh my gosh.
Taking it too literally. Yeah.
Taking it extremely literally. So another area that you went to, and I absolutely loved when I went, was Slovenia. And I love saying the capital, Ljubljana. I think it's just one of my favorite words to say.
Yeah, I actually struggled with the pronunciation, you know, the whole time we were there. And I think I have it now, Ljubljana, right? Ljubljana. I don't know why, I just couldn't quite get it, but it's a beautiful city. We love the city. Um, and the trips we took from there, of course, to the stud farm was very interesting and, you know, beautiful countryside as well. And another one of those things that perhaps we would not have, you know, known to schedule for ourselves, you know, if we were doing something on our own. So yeah, that was a great place. Actually, when I think about Ljubljana, something that always comes to my mind is, you know, with another couple, and there was a woman who was traveling solo. Um, it was the second to our last stay on the trip. You know, we were going to be going off to Zagreb the next day and then flying home. And so we took the funicular up to the castle. I don't know if you did that, you know, too. And there's a restaurant up there with an outside terrace. It was a lovely day, you know, just a little jacket weather. We shared a bottle of wine, watched the sunset, and talked about how great the trip had been and how it was coming to an end soon. And, you know, I know I was, you know, starting to feel like, gosh, I wish this could go on a little bit longer.
Which was a little surprising because you know, usually our trips had been about 11 or to 13 days. And I think we might have done one that was 2 weeks. And so, you know, as we approached it, we thought, well, you know, 15 days overall, it seems like it's going to be a long period of time, but it went by so quickly. And like you said, we could have done another 2 weeks. It was really a good group. It was such a great tour.
That's such a great feeling when you're on tour and you're not, you know, you always miss home, but you're not in a rush to get home or for the tour to end.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I would have to say more than any other trip, I felt that way. Usually I'm about ready to get home, but not so much here.
And it sounds like they kept it interesting with, you know, you did the walking tour. You said you walked with a mirror through the tunnels. You had the cable car. So it sounds like you were constantly keeping it interesting, mixing it up, having these cultural experiences. And I imagine a lot of free time. You mentioned your tour manager made some recommendations for how to spend your free time. So you got to do some exploring independently. And I think that recharges you too.
Yeah, and actually that's that independent time, the free time, was a big plus for us in going with Collette, having that built in because of how it does give you the opportunity to explore on your own or maybe with another guest. Have, people could have downtime if they wanted, or like us, they could be busy, wanting to do as much as possible. So yeah, that's a big plus, the combination of having guidance with a real guide and then getting recommendations from a guide and then maybe going off and just doing something, totally different. Yeah.
What did you think of the food there?
I loved it, and I'll have Randy talk about his special things too. But what stands out to me in particular, burek, the phyllo stuffed dish with it's usually the real burek has meat in it, but Randy does not eat meat, and another version of it is spinach, which you enjoyed, right? I believe.
Spinach, and I also had another one with potatoes. So yeah, very, very
Oh,
good.
I didn't even remember that one. But and then another dish, and this was in Sarajevo. We had that. We also had cevapi. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it's meat sticks, and that's the only way I can call it, in pita. And then, of course, with condiments, I think tomatoes and onions were what we were putting on there. And Randy, what about the strukli? We liked the strukli in
Yeah,
Zagreb.
that was in Zagreb, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, that was very good. We had a very tight window in order to do that, and it was this one restaurant in particular, outdoor seating along the stairway within the city, and we just made it in time, but it was delicious. We had it with another guest.
Because it takes a half hour to prepare. Yeah.
Takes a half hour to prepare, and it was I guess you say lasagna like, but that doesn't do it justice. It was really fun.
Yeah, creamy. It's a baked, creamy dish, right? A casserole
Yep.
type thing. Just really, really delicious. But if I'll just move on to the sweet item on the list. Now, of
Oh
course,
yes.
and I dream about this sometimes. It's the kremschnita at Lake Bled. It was created at Lake Bled. It's a custard and cream dessert. It's got a thin, crispy crust on it, and it is amazing. So that was something we did with our group, and I highly recommend it.
Well, you got me hungry.
That was a lunch that day with sparkling wine, I think.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, we had healthy portions of the kremschnita. But you also the seafood, Randy. What about seafood?
Yeah, I was gonna mention that. There's
Yeah.
so although I don't eat meat or fowl, I have always eaten seafood, and so the fresh seafood was a big part of it for me. And I think the other thing that I would point out is how Collette had done in our tour guide had done such a good job of kind of seamlessly making meals that accommodated that for me very easily. So that was good.
Mhm.
But the fresh seafood is always a treat.
Yeah. Yeah, the food. So the food was great.
It sounds like
very great.
very interesting compared to other foods around the world. I mean, you know what you're going to expect when you go to Italy or
Mhm.
Japan. So this, I actually am asking because I had no idea and I hadn't heard of most of the meals you just said, but
Okay.
you compared it to lasagna. That's enough for me.
And I'm very impressed with your pronunciations.
Oh, well, thank you. Glad I didn't know if I had them right.
And back to Ljubljana, I can't remember what you and the other guest that was with us had at the outdoor restaurant there. You had sausages and
Yeah, sausages and sauerkraut.
sauerkraut, and I wasn't hungry that night. But they had was it mushroom soup, I think, right? On the menu in a bread bowl, which I usually don't do. So I asked them if I could just have a regular bowl of it. And it was a very large bowl of soup. And it was so good that I ordered another one and ate the whole thing and still wanted more. So that one is another food that stood out to me.
Another food memory. Yeah.
I love that.
Yes.
So really, is there any tours now that you're looking at, the Balkans area, and you've really encompassed a lot of Europe? Is there anything that you're really looking forward to travel to, or anything that you have your eye on?
As far as Collette tours go in general, we do keep up with I peruse the Collette online wish book often, and and also follow social media, and have been kind of intrigued with some of the destinations you've been featuring, like Morocco and Turkey, and I think Japan is kind of being highlighted now too. Um, obviously, I know you have a number of other small group explorations within, Europe proper as well, that, look awesome. But what's kind of has attracted me to those I just mentioned is that they, much like the Balkans did, it kind of moves us, out, going a little more further afield and into places where I see guided travel as being the best way to do it for, even experienced travelers like ourselves. So that's kind of what what are your thoughts about?
Well, just in general, and maybe not specific to Colette, but when you speak of bucket lists, I think the idea of where we had focused on North America and Europe, I think slowly but surely going out to other continents, and so certainly Morocco would cover that base, or Egypt, or places like that,
Yeah.
Australia. So those are some of the things that are on the list that we're anxious to get to somehow.
Yeah.
That's exciting, and I love that you called it an online wish book. I think we should rename it because
I think
we
so.
we call it brochures,
Okay. Yes.
and that sounds way less interesting. But you're right. It's when you go online or you look through the brochures, it's just a series of experiences that are waiting for you, that are waiting for all of our travelers.
Right.
Um, and I love what you said too about how some destinations, even if you're a very experienced traveler, might be ideal to go guided. So for you, what did you mean by that?
Um, well, what I mean is that it enough out or I know that, for instance, going to Morocco, to me, it seems would involve, some logistics and, planning that is quite different than, I do when I plan a trip to France, or a trip to Italy or Greece even, or Spain, where we've had some experience, because um, uh, at least the way we view it, and having a guide in places like that is the way to go, because the cultural aspects may be quite different, than we're used to. And being guided, you get a lot of good tips and, insights on that. Um, and I think Randy and I were talking about this just yesterday. I think about transportation too. And we love driving. We love doing driving trips, and we drive in countries in Europe. But I can see that perhaps Morocco or Turkey would be a place I would really appreciate having, professionals, familiar with the territory and the geography, doing that for us. Yeah.
On the Balkan tour, I was amazed a number of times about the driver and his ability to uh, navigate some areas that, frankly, even here in the United States, I would be leery to try with a small car or a Jeep. And he was doing it with this large vehicle, and doing it just so absolutely skillfully. Uh, there's another situation too that he accommodated pretty neat while we were
The sheep.
with the sheep. Yeah.
The sheep in Bosnia, that is all of a sudden driving through Bosnia. I don't know how many sheep were in this herd, but it was a lot. A lot. I did post it on Instagram too. Yeah. So, being ready for those types of situations and knowing how to deal with them.
I think the language barrier too in some countries, and to your point, the cultural uh, differences that you might come across. It's our tour managers tend to feel, a lot of people will tell us, like, like a local that you've become friends with because they know the destination. They oftentimes it's where they live.
Yeah.
So, and then you have this built-in free time, so you can, if you're very well traveled and you want that free time, you have the opportunity to have that free time on your tour. But knowing that someone who lives there is giving you this sort of inside scoop on telling you what to do, and that you don't have to worry about those logistics or things like driving on another side of the road or trying to read traffic signs that are in another language. And it's difficult. It can be a logistical nightmare. It definitely takes a lot of planning.
Right.
So it can be helpful to just let someone else handle it.
The other thing that I would add to that is, with respect to the tour was, we were impressed with the accommodations from the standpoint that they all seemed to be just exactly correctly chosen for the particular region or city that we were in. And so, we were on the Adriatic coast in an upscale hotel in Dubrovnik, which probably is not what we would have thought of on our own, but it was a great contrast to the other things we were able to do in Dubrovnik. In Kodar, we were in the historic little hotel within the village itself, and it was a very good fit. And I think there are many examples like that where it just seemed to us, we commented a number of times, boy, that was just the right place for that region.
Right. Well, like the Roxanich Winery and Hotel, perfect for being in the Istria region of Croatia, in the middle of the vineyards and olive groves. And of course, they had the winery, their own winery, which we toured all 4 stories of it, which was pretty amazing.
Which was just beneath the hotel, actually.
Sounds incredible. You've convinced me. I have to add this to my list. It's on my list. It's not very high up, but I was curious to see if I would change my mind after chatting with you guys and move it higher up on the list. And I honestly think 1 3-hour stop in Dubrovnik is probably not enough.
Go back, definitely go back and
Yes.
walk the city walls, do all the things we did, and you'll have a great time there.
That tour is on my list, the one that you guys took. I'm so excited.
Good.
And I think we found that the exploration small group concept for Collette was an almost ideal fit for
Yes.
us. I mean, it really gave us the immersive things, the diversity of activities, diversity of cultures, and on and on. It really very much matched. And for the two of us, Sweeney is the person who usually does our planning and travel, and she does a very good job.
Thank you.
You did one of our first trips to Europe had been to Ireland, and I gave her I don't know, probably 7 days notice, and said, I've got a break in work. Why don't we go to Ireland for 10 days? And this was really at the very early stages of the internet, and she was able to plan a pretty good travel.
I got lucky, I think, on that.
That's impressive.
She commented about I don't know, 100 times about how nice it was not to have to do all of that work, and how good a job Collette had done.
Yeah, I have said that often, that I mean, it was a treat. It was a treat to have Colette in charge of all of that and doing it so beautifully. As much as I may enjoy doing it, in at other times, it's a very nice treat.
I'm so happy you guys are back out traveling. It's clearly
Mhm.
such a passion for both of you. And I know you said something I think we all felt that, in 2020, we didn't have the option to go out and see the world. So I love that you're back out and you have already taken so many trips and that you
Yeah.
have more already planned. So
Yeah.
I'm glad that you're able to keep doing what you love.
Thank you.
And we're so excited to have you back on the road with us again at Collette. We're excited for your next adventure, and we hope that everybody follows along. And if you just want to let everybody know where they can find you on Instagram, on your blog.
Sure. Yeah. The blog is travelingwithsweeney.com. And for our friends in Canada or the UK, that's traveling with 1L. And on Instagram, it's also Traveling with Sweeney. Also on Twitter, Traveling with S, Facebook, Traveling with Sweeney. There's links to all of the social media platforms if you go out to the website. And LinkedIn too, LinkedIn.
Thank you.
Well, thank you both for joining us. And I want to thank our listeners for tuning in. It's been a real pleasure really getting a chance to talk with you about the Balkans, to kind of relive Croatia for me and the Game of Thrones. And I really was excited to have you both on. I was excited to have this great conversation.
Great. We were too. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
And in the spirit of the name of the podcast, Travel Unpacked, what would you say would be the number one thing you would tell people not to forget to pack?
Okay, well, I think this is appropriate for a lot of travel. Appropriate footwear. And that means, we do a lot of walking, when we travel. And in European cities, you're going to have cobblestones. You're going to have, activity level 3, like this tour was. So make sure you've got some good, comfortable shoes. And I was really delighted that I brought my new midnight blue high top sneakers. They were, I thought they were cool, and they were also super comfortable and supportive. So that's what I say. Randy?
Well, this isn't necessarily for the Balkan tour, but I have to say that I did learn something on this trip, which was uh, always pack a day of clothes in your carry-on. And my bag was lost for a couple of days. It was sent to Switzerland. And, in general, in my defense, so many years of travel, we always did carry-ons. And so it's only been the last year or two that we checked. And so I had only a single bag, but everything was in there except for, just a few little personal items. And so I would definitely recommend doing that. The other comment that brings up is, Sweeney has commented about Juke and what a great guide that tour manager he was. But and all of the other people that were on the tour felt that way as well. But he was extremely helpful, going out of his way to coordinate with the airlines to make sure that it was being tracked and expedited. And so it got back to me pretty quickly.
There we go. Those are wonderful tips.
Okay.
Ones that I will definitely use, especially, making sure that I have a little extra clothing in my carry-on with me.
And no stilettos.
And
No.
Yeah.
Well,
Great.
thank you both so much. It was so wonderful getting to chat with you and getting to know you and talk about your recent trip to the Balkans.
Thank you so much. We enjoyed it.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Well, that was wonderful having them on talking about the Balkans today. It was great because they were our first guests. How did you think that went?
They are couples' goals, traveling the world together, married and writing about all these places they're going, taking beautiful photography and photos, keeping a blog, the social media accounts. Just their life is it's exciting. It was great to sit with them and listen to them talk about what they're so passionate about.
I know I'm so excited to continue to follow them and to see where their next adventure leads them here with Collette too. And we'll definitely put more information out about that when we know. So I'm excited. I'm excited to have Kelsey back the next time. She'll be a great at the table again. And on that note, I think I'm gonna head out for a little treat and have a little of that cream shinada that she talked about from Croatia.
Where are you getting that?
Maybe I'm just gonna make it. I have to figure that out.
Can you spell it?
Actually, I can. It's Krea. No, I can't.
If you figure out how to make it, please bring me some at the office.
Maybe we'll have it during the next episode.
Perfect. Well, on that note too, I'm going to send one more packing tip because this is Travel Unpacked, coming from Traveling with Sweeney. Next time you go out on the road, do not forget to pack your comfortable walking shoes.